Christ is born in Bethlehem. Amen. Please be seated. Merry Christmas. It was in the spring of our 8th grade year when a group of my friends and I petitioned our parents to let us camp on our own at the edge of a popular swimming hole on a lake some 6 or 7 miles outside of our town. The spot we chose was a few hundred yards from the main road, surrounded by trees, with no civilization of any type for miles in every direction. We would be on our own and in the wild. Reluctantly, our parents caved one by one to our persistent asking, and at the appointed time, we all arrived at the trailhead to carry our poorly packed and profuse camping gear down the hill to the shore. Those whose parents were abundantly chill about the whole arrangement let their sons bike out to the spot. Those of us whose parents had more than just a few misgivings drove us themselves, checking the campsite, insisting on helping us set up the camp, and offering final admonitions, which included things like don't drink and don't burn the forest down. And then, bidding farewell, they were gone. I don't recall much of what we did to pass the evening, though there were some shenanigans. A can of soda, I remember, was thrown in the fire to see if it would explode. It did. But mostly wholesome things happened, like skipping rocks and carving sticks for s'mores. And when nightfall came, we made a pact that none of us would sleep in a tent. Instead, we circled our sleeping bags around the fire and decided to camp out under the stars. As the sky darkened, the lights of our town were so far away that no matter how our eyes strained into the darkness, we could not see the glow of civilization against the velvet blackness of night. It was pitch dark. And as the moon rose and as the stars came out, a pack of wolves began to howl down the shore from us, their songs ringing out an eerie chorus across the placid waters, unseen in the night, but too close for comfort. This is when our associate rector says, "I'm an indoorsman." Thank you very much. To say that we were afraid that night would be a serious understatement. We were terrified. Mind you, this was before the era of cell phones, and so we were wholly and utterly alone, armed only with pocket knives and apparently exploding soda cans. So we stoked the fire and pulled our sleeping bags closer together. Slowly, much to my dismay, one by one my comrades drifted off to sleep, and I found myself wide awake and huddling deeper and deeper into my sleeping bag, eyes trained on the fire, willing it to ward off prowling predators, deftly afraid to look out into the unyielding darkness, fearing that at any moment the firelight would glint off of the eyes of an unwelcome visitor. Such is my context for the fear and terror of shepherds in Luke's very familiar Christmas story, keeping watch over their flocks by night in the hills around Bethlehem. I think, too, of my wife's late grandpa Bob as a young boy, all of 8 or 9 years old, whose family sent him to the fields beyond their rural North Dakota home to shepherd their small flock of sheep. So traumatic were those experiences, he shared them only a few times with his children, who in turn told his grandchildren the deep fear that would accompany him each night as he sat out late into the evening, watching over these defenseless animals, eyes ever straining into the darkness, keeping lookout for coyotes and cougars, wondering what, if anything, he could do as a small boy to protect his flock. Then I think of those shepherds again, so often depicted as rough and tough and the unwashed, world-worn cowboys of their day, and imagine them instead as children, more akin to the young biblical David, forced by their status as the youngest and the least to the most menial and unsavory of tasks to ward off predators and to keep the night watches. Isn't that the way the world so often works? That to preserve the comfort and ease of the most powerful, we force the vulnerable among us into places of deep fear and anxiety, out into spaces of danger and trauma and even violence. It is these, the poorest and those who live at the margins, whose eyes are ever straining for the unseen danger, the unexpected medical bill, the unanticipated and cruel cuts to supportive services, the calculated shift in policy that places their lives in the crosshairs of an empire. That is what empire teaches. It trains our eyes to watch the shining glory it has built at the center of all its own world, and then it commands us to look for where that power sits, to glue our eyes to the middle of it all, to that glorious, glamorously built, lit center. Empire pulls our attention with the glint of the sword, the sparkling chandeliers of ballrooms, and the flash of pristine marble from the facades of towering buildings. Look over here, it beckons us. Look and be amazed at the glitter of gold. Look with awe at the glowing center where those with access gather. Look on the bright armor and the blazing torches of battalions and be afraid. After all, fear is the currency of empires. And so it must hold our gaze in its brightness, and it must train our attention, and it must teach us what to fear. But the Christmas story is different. It pulls our focus. In those days, says Luke, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. It begins in the center with the emperor, but it moves immediately out to a province, Syria, where Quirinius is governor, still basking in the glow of the empire, but moving away from the center toward the margins. And then almost to Jerusalem, to Bethlehem, further and further from the glowing center of it all. And here we are told of two peasants, unwed and pregnant, the vulnerable citizens of an empire they did not choose, forced to move their lives and their bodies to accommodate the demands of the powerful, searching for a place to stay. Here, yet again, there isn't even space in a home or an inn. So the story shifts one step further away, out to the shadows of the stable, and a child is born and laid in a feeding trough. And out here, says the gospel, out here at the farthest reaches of the known world, out on the very uttermost margins, in the shadows, in the dark, this is where the world was changed. Look here and do not be afraid. Instead, rejoice. The angelic hosts, as if to underscore this story, proclaim this good news that Jesus, the Messiah, the Lord, is born, and they proclaim it to a ragtag group of shivering young shepherds. Do not be afraid, for this is good news of great joy for all people. Look away from the fearful, brightly lit center of empire. Look instead, says Luke, at Jesus. Poor, vulnerable, a newborn, lying among the animals with his migrant parents. This, at the edge of everything, as far from the powerful center as you can get, here in the quiet, away from the machines of empire, unknown and unseen, this is where your heart and your whole attention should look. There is something powerful in retraining our gaze to look here at the scene of Jesus and the Holy Family, to the simplicity and stillness of their world at rest, in the shadow. Looking here holds the possibility of reshaping our imaginations to comprehend hope as embodied in the most humble and human of forms. In her powerful book, This Here Flesh, Cole Arthur Riley does not shy away from naming the fearful realities facing our world, and especially facing those whose bodies and identities would make them marginalized in a world dominated by empires. But she also acknowledges that sometimes it isn't fear itself that is the enemy. Sometimes fear teaches us. She writes, "Whenever my friend's ma was fed up, she used to mumble, 'I might be limping through the valley of the shadow of death.'" And then she continues, "What I skipped over in the psalm she was referencing time and time again is the sacred praxis it begins with. The psalmist says, 'He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters.'" She continues, "I find it beautiful that in the face of terror, God doesn't bid us toward courage as we might perceive it. Instead, he draws us towards fear's essential sister, rest. A sister who is not meant to replace fear, but to exist in tension and harmony with it. For fear's origin is not evil, though evil certainly wields it against our souls daily." You see, drawing our gaze out of the bright and busy machinations of empire, the source of so much fear in our world, and focusing anew our attention on the restful, quiet, and peaceful vision of that first Christmas is an essential rebalancing of the world to make us capable of living with hope and care for one another. Luke says, "The shepherds, upon seeing this sight, returned to their fields rejoicing and glorifying God for all that they had seen." On the lakeshore that night, lo, those many years ago, as a fearful young tween in the wild, I remember noticing, after some hours had passed, that one of my friends had stayed awake through the night with me, that he was the one who had kept the fire burning, and it was he who was quietly keeping company with me through the night, steadily, patiently, probably just as afraid as me, but doing something. And suddenly, aware of his presence and care, the quiet, constant company he had given through the dark watches, I found myself able to look away from the bright center of the fire. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness of the early morning, slowly the forms of the farther shore took shape in shadow. The darkened sky, spangled with the last stars of night, seemed to pulse with the luminous glow of the whole cosmos. And on the horizon was the promise of dawn. And it was as if the world had been transformed from a haven of fear into the glorious source of all goodness, a transcendent place of deep mystery and profound wonder. And I was able to sleep. This night, as we celebrate the gift of God with us, the birth of Jesus, humble and in a manger, out at the darkened edge of the world, on the margins and in the shadow, we are bid again to look away from the center of empire, to claim hope, to rejoice and to be not afraid. For unto us a child is born, this blessed and holy night. Amen. Amen. Merry Christmas, friends.